This is NFTi's official space, Twitter Spaces. We do them periodically. NFTi is a peer-to-peer marketplace where you can use the NFTs you own to access the liquidity that you need. And today in this Spaces, we're going to talk about early NFT art. And I'm super happy to have over 3 guests with their respective projects. They are real OGs. They've been around and doing this way before probably most of us have even heard about NFTs, at least the majority, I'm sure. I'm just looking at the screen just to see what I see from my side. The Blue from CryptoSkulls is over here. I'm sure we will have a lot to talk about the project and about himself. Harm van der Dorpel from Left Gallery is over, and Michael Chan from IKB. How do you spell it? How do you pronounce it? I'm trying not to butcher it.
It's
de Guarantee.
you can the collection on OpenSea is Cache de Garantie,
Cache de
and
Guarantee. Yeah, okay.
yes, and the project is called and the actual title of the project is even worse. It is Digital Zones of Immaterial Pictorial Sensibility.
Okay.
So you can just stick to IKB, and that's just fine.
Thank you so much for pronouncing it for me, especially the second one. So let's start rolling, and I guess we can just go over just a general introduction in terms of what you guys do. Not the projects yet, just you as at a personal level. I think maybe we can start just by what has been your journey, your first step getting into this space, because all of us have different stories of how we ended up in this amazing space. So Blue, if you can tell me, how did you end up in the NFTs, that would be great. And then later on, once we cover that, we will start looking into the project specifically.
Hey, Ani, thank you so much. And sorry if my audio is not perfect. I'm running it back up to my office in a second. But super excited to be here. I guess a little background about myself. I've been in crypto since 2015. All the money I made since then has been lost. And then I gained some and then I lost some again, as many here probably know if you've been around long enough. And, even that's not really considered early. But I've only been in NFT specifically for the past year. So I myself am still very new to the space, but learning a lot every day. And, have been super kind of lucky to just meet people and be part of some really cool projects where I was able to kind of learn and I can kind of flesh it out as I tell a story about CryptoSkulls, but happy to be here. And thank you for having me up today.
Okay, nice. So you're the one who's pretty fresh, and I guess that has been a very intense 1 year of catching up, probably. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I can imagine. Okay, Harm, what about you?
Yeah, my first steps in the crypto world were in 2015 when I collaborated with a startup in Berlin called Ascribe, where I was introduced to the possibility of storing information on a blockchain besides currency or besides monetary functionality, that you could also store other information like ownership. And I had been a digital artist for quite a while and had always encountered hurdles in monetizing that or connecting that to like an art market, and blockchain suddenly seemed like a feasible option. So I engaged with that, and then gradually the novelty wore off and people were again forgetting about crypto. I stayed a bit stubborn because I really thought it was a good idea, and at some point this startup stopped, and then I migrated my first ERC 721 contract. So this was like around 2017, and there was not much attention for that, and so I was on and off in this space. Sometimes I just was not active in crypto at all, but then like the past 2 years, it suddenly exploded, as we all know.
Yeah.
And then also there was a lot of attention suddenly for these old contracts that I had deployed with these older works by me and by artists whose contracts I programmed for them. And this has been very exciting and overwhelming and confusing at times. But Yeah, I was very fascinated to join this call because if I think about like 2015, I would have never thought that these tokens would be used as for liquidity. That is a very far-fetched idea. So
Oh
fascinating.
yeah. Even a few months ago, I think it was still kind of pretty early for that niche specifically and that application, I guess. But yeah, 2015, that's really, really early. That's even way before the ICO boom. So even cryptocurrency itself hasn't really been so popular back then.
Yeah.
So it's kind of very, very early. Um,
I can
so
also tell like
yeah.
Blue who said that they spent all the coins they made early on. At some point, me and my wife, it was I think our 10th anniversary, which is now 5 years ago, and we threw a party and we spent all our Bitcoin in a restaurant that accepted Bitcoin payments, and we had the
That's
most amazing night with all our friends and family, and we ate and drank all our Bitcoin, and yeah,
That's an
I can
epic
imagine
story,
it.
man, and don't feel bad about it. Seriously, because that you can tell that story forever now, and people will just be in awe about it. So awesome.
I live only once. I don't want to. I would not have wanted to miss that party.
No, I think it's kind of, life is about priorities and anniversary and family and love is probably worth way more than money. So I'm sure it was worth it. Mitchell, what about you? Because in my notes, I see 2017 there, but maybe I'm mistaken. Maybe on personal level, you've started way earlier.
Yeah, so I'm still laughing about Harm eating and drinking all his Bitcoin. I think that's so beautiful. Um, my story. Let's see. I have been an artist for about 15 years now, and I have worked primarily in the type of art that you would think to be the complete opposite of crypto and NFTs. I've worked primarily making public art, large sculptural installations that weigh 8,000 pounds and are in the middle of a park and are never going to go anywhere. um,
Oh,
and
wow.
uh, and gallery installations, large pieces that take up an entire room that you physically inhabit with your own body. Um, but I've always worked with technology as a medium and as a subject. And it felt very natural for me in my practice that I would start thinking about how to use programmable money as a way to make an artwork. And so I started to do that in 2017. And I created an artwork that would become sort of an early proto NFT. And that's sort of how I got here. And it was very much, I didn't really know exactly what I was doing. It was a very sort of natural continuation of uh, investigations that I've been doing in my artistic practice previously.
Oh, that's super cool. I mean, I really, it's very rare to be fair, where, until recently when artists are also kind of pretty comfortable with tech and when you have this ideal mixture of both sides, because I think that kind of brings such a big potential of possibilities that artists are exploring as a result of that. So yeah, let's dive into these very early stage projects and talk about them. So CryptoSkulls. Oh, and to refer to this, all projects that our guests are represented are whitelisted on NFTfi. So all these NFTs from these projects can be used as collaterals for a crypto loan in there. Just shameless plug in there. So CryptoSkulls was whitelisted recently. CryptoSkulls, the unique part of it is that it's been live since May 2019, and it's the second 10,000 K PFP project on the Ethereum blockchain. Blue, do you want to talk about, I think that there has been a wave where all these old projects kind of got their, um, you know, uh, renaissance, so to speak, with the time. We saw what happened to CryptoPunks, CryptoKitties as well, kind of, got a bit of attention as well. And CryptoSkulls basically was part of, was it part of that wave that got attention and revived the project, or was it something else?
So yeah, it's a great question, and there's always going to be some people that argue CryptoSkulls were not the second PFP, but a really important delineation is that we're the what makes it really hardened in history about being the second 10K PFP is what's unique is that it was on ERC 721. Most of the projects before that are between CryptoPunks that claim the BPFP are not on ERC 721. So it's really important in terms of the evolution of the technology of ERC 721 specifically and how that became the standard in the Ethereum blockchain on what PFP projects were really, as a collector, when you go and find a PFP project, you want to make sure it's on ERC 721 and not, an OpenSea store contract, right? Anything else. So that's just an important thing I want to mention. But in terms of the timeline, so, um, you know, CryptoSkulls are very late in terms of the historical NFT timeline, in my opinion. Leonidas is part of our leadership, obviously, and he's very much involved with our community, and it's been a pleasure to work with. He's, a proclaimed NFT archaeologist and knows way more about this space than I do in terms of archaeology. Um, I actually know he owns probably a few digital zones as well as probably every kind of project you could think of that's really historical. But CryptoSkulls came out in early 2019, so that's really at the late end of what you'd consider historical, in my opinion. But it was still part of that time where crypto art was still called crypto art, and NFTs were not a mainstream terminology, right? Really, NFTs kind of came to the scene late 2020. People started talking about NFTs as NFTs, not crypto art, and there's this important shift. But at the time, skulls were created by our creator and lead dev Alex Slayer, who's out of Moscow, Russia. It was considered crypto art, and basically the origin story around it is, you had this one guy who was super passionate about creating a PFP project because he felt like there wasn't enough kind of that outlet in the space. There were games popping up and some other things, but nothing that was really concretely like a PFP project. And that's the first goal of the project was just a cool PFP that could bring people together, influenced by the Diablo universe and some other things that he just personally really liked, right? So um, you know, he wrote the software and the entire algorithm and everything that generated these skulls from scratch. So he built this project from the ground up. He used no templates, no software that you'd see today with all these 10K PFP projects coming out. Everything was made in-house, which is really unique. And so he spent a lot of time doing that, I think, leading up to 2019. And then he finally minted the project into his own wallet because at the time, right, there wasn't there was no such thing as the whitelist craze and, people lining up to mint something on a public mint. He minted everything and put it in his wallet, and he started giving these things out for free. Early NFT Twitter days, I guess. If that even counts, early 2019. And what his sole intention was really just creating a community. That's really what he wanted to do. He did have a vision to create an ecosystem and really kind of blazed the path on what you see Bored Ape Yacht Club do now and what became the blueprint. Alex was already doing it, and it's a really important part of the story because Alex was already planning a token launch and did a token launch. He was already planning the porting of APIs to different worlds when the metaverse was more established. All of that was planned and in his head before kind of this whole universe exploded, what I call the NFT Cambrian explosion, right? So he's very kind of innovative in the way he thought about this project. But fast forward to the rediscovery. So basically, he spent 3 years giving away skulls and building a seriously grassroots community of just OG crypto artists, trash artists, guys that have been around since 2012, making art and doing stuff. So OGs, people I feel very lucky to be able to talk to and share a community with. And so that's really what it was. It was 500, about 400 or 500 people. I came on about a year ago CryptoSkulls were my first NFT. I forget how I came across them, but something about them just really resonated with me, and the historical aspect was cool. I was still learning, and they were cheap. They were 0.03, and the project had been around for 3 years, so I'm like, or 2 years at the time, and so I just I went in, and so fast forward the rediscovery, you had Alex kind of slowly building this thing, but not really, since it was a solo project. He only had so much time or resources to dedicate. And then really that's where NFTs really started to take off, and he got, the skulls got left behind in a way, right? Because, historical projects in general are still, although they're kind of considered hot now, they're still very, very undervalued across the board. And, you know, it's kind of like luck of the draw. Like I considered the skull super lucky for what had happened to us, but basically you had a guy who kept his head down, built this thing for 3 years, was grinding away, running the social media, trying to do partnerships, but could only do so much. Didn't have a team, didn't have mods, didn't have anyone. And I was there as kind of a bystander and a supporter, as were a lot of other people at the time, right? We would just kind of support him in the Discord and let him do his thing, and I would go and help and start doing other projects at the time that I'm still involved with today and love and near and dear to my heart. But now with the skulls, it's a lot different. And so then during the rediscovery period, which was about 5 weeks ago, you had this fateful night where Medved was an early supporter of the skulls as well, and he had told some friends, but he had been in the schools for like 6 months prior to this. But he told Leonidas like the day before this rediscovery in January. It's like, hey, you should look at the skulls. Like, I don't see them on your timeline. They might be qualified to be something that you can go dig into. So Leonidas had never heard about them. He did his research. He studied the contract. He was in and out, kind of doing a lot of like background work on what the skulls were, and then he decided, okay, I carry some conviction for these guys. They're very undervalued. No one knows what they are. I'm going to sweep these up because that's just what NFT archaeologists like Leonidas does, right? So he saw the opportunity, and then that's when I was about to go to bed. I, was checking the Discord once a week because it was so quiet, right? Just absolute crickets in this Discord. I'm talking about like 300-400 people most. Maybe the occasional fudder or someone complaining, and we just tell them to go fuck off because, it was like, hey, this guy in Russia, Alex, is like working his ass off, guys. Like, just let him do his thing. And then I go in, and there's over 10,000 people in the Discord, and there's people like Gary V asking questions like what the skulls are, and I'm sitting there like, what the hell's going on? Is this real? And it was a very critical moment in the Crypto Skull story where like no one was really stepping up. I don't think anyone wanted to step up because it was so chaotic. And I just felt like something in me was like, I've been wanting to like really build a community from scratch for a while. And I was going to do newer projects, but hey, this looks like a really good opportunity. And I really believe in what Alex has been doing for the past 3 years. So I don't want this to be in a flash in the pan for him as a creator and someone who's been really working hard at this. So I'm going to step in and hopefully try to control the chaos in the narrative. So that's really the night we were rediscovered. And then fast forward 5 weeks, we've built out an incredible team, all volunteers right now, just incredible. And just a community has really come together from all different facets of the space and in real life in general. A lot of creators, but a lot of people from other areas as well. And we all kind of carry the same mission. And now it's still kind of like a blank slate. We're forming a DAO. So there were a bunch of skulls that were in Alex's wallet at the time when the rediscovery happened, and he had a deployer that would go off and distribute skulls at floor price when we would reach certain milestones. So first it was point 0.2. Okay, 500 skulls deployed at floor price. Then it was 0.5 or 0.6, 500. And people thought he was dumping, but he had written a script that would just deploy these things as it would go up. And what's even more incredible is that he was not selling these Dutch auction style. He was just selling them at floor. So in a way, he was being pretty freaking generous of what he was doing. And so then it got to a point where it was just so crazy. People were fighting. I contacted Alex and just said, hey, man, can we consider just turning the deployer off once we get our feet under us? And he did. And then I had him think about like what he wanted to do with those skulls, and he came back and he said, I want to give 1,500 of these skulls to the community, and then I want to give so and so for giveaways, and I will keep 100 locked up between me and my co-founder for a year. And so when you think about that, and this guy just made over $5 million really overnight from the rediscovery, for someone like that to come back to someone like me, who he does kind of know because I've been involved to some degree, but like it's not like he should trust me 100%. No one should, right? He comes back and it's like, I want to give 1,500 skulls to the community. It's really impactful and really shows the type of character he is. And it really helped us rally and get this DAO formation going. So we're going to form a DAO. The DAO is really going to be about how we deploy those assets to help the community. It's not going to be about strict project direction. I do believe, DAOs, as cool of a system it is, it's very inefficient. We need a checks and balances system in place where my team and Alex can work independently in terms of partnerships, direction, and what will form as the Skull Nation brand. But then the DAO is really community ownership over an immense amount of assets and gives them direct influence on how they want that community to be built out. So we're all about permissionless building. We have a
Yeah.
Skull Builders program, all that. So I know I've been talking for a long time. It's just such a mouthful of a story in a lot of different parts. So it's worth just one go. But I'm here for your questions, Ani, and I appreciate you having me up today. And we're just skimming the surface on this, but yeah, really
Yeah.
cool project and story, and happy to be up here. One last thing is like one of the biggest things we believe in, and what Leonidas is really important part of is we want to bridge old with new. We see ourselves as kind of like the gateway drug to the rest of the historical community. So we want to play our part in making sure we help shed light on historical projects. So on our community spaces tomorrow, we'll have I think it's called the Realms of Ether. I might be mispronouncing that, but we try to have people up once in a while and just shed light on those artists and those projects, and just do our part, because I consider ourselves very lucky to be given the opportunity. Now we want to go execute and give back. So that's my last
No,
point.
I think it's a beautiful story, and I do think that like historical projects and the projects that have been around and kind of saw this opportunity and did things way before anyone else was around and way before the hype. And obviously, those projects didn't do those things because there was an opportunity for a crash grab, or it was very fashionable, etc. So that itself already is a very good indicator. And to be around for so many years after that, it's another kind of proof that the project is sustainable. It's very interesting that kind of everything works out for projects very often when people with a certain powerful influence in the space discover them. So like I think like the whole thing, the way you explain it, happened and was triggered because Gary V, Aptin, G Money, Fuck Render, all these big guys kind of noticed and went ahead with it and became vocal about it. Which is another story and another angle. We want to touch that, but yeah.
And I just want to make one point on that. It's like, and that's why there's still a lot of misinformation about the CryptoSkulls today, is because people have their guards up when they see an influencer involved with something, and that's totally understandable. And one thing I just want to say about that is like all these people were sitting in these group chats late at night and they saw the volume that Leonidas was producing, and they were like, what the hell am I missing out on? And they all kind of went in. I would say half the influential people that sculled in that night are actually not part of the skulls anymore. They flipped their way up. So looking on the on-chain data, looking at the transaction activity is super interesting if you want to spend enough time. But you got to be really careful about the people who do have a voice in the space, because a lot of them are just flipping their way through this crazy hype train. And the skulls are a perfect example of that. But like what really solidified it for me is like, Gary V, people have their opinions about. I certainly do. I'm by no means a Gary V fanboy. But when he like bought a skull, when we did our spaces that first week and he came up and he asked me to tell the story about the CryptoSkulls and talk about Alex, he bought a Lord Skull for 100 ETH on the spaces. And for me, that's where it was really real, because for someone with a reputation like that to go up there and to buy something that's still very speculative or could be a rug pull, who knows, and to really like have conviction based off the story and the narrative we try to tell everyone, meant a lot to me, and like I think everyone part of the community. So we really took it as an opportunity for we should execute and actually do what we're not seeing today with like a lot of projects, and really try to be kind of a movement and not like this, this kind of a cash grab or this like
Yeah, no, absolutely. I get that.
So
And I think that's important as well. I want to move to Mitchell, because I think it's like when I read the sort of, the inspiration behind the project, and then when I had read about the project, it's fascinating. It's kind of, it's very special, very unique, very interesting. It's definitely way, way more different than PFP projects and what they represent. It's probably completely opposite of it. I mean, probably you can't even see it. So I guess, Mitchell, do you want to talk about the inspiration behind the project and how you came up with it and how special it is? And I mean, why is it special? Because I don't want to tell that story instead of you. So yeah.
Sure, thank you. I won't go super in depth to, the whole story about some of the artistic precedents for this work, just because, because I'm also really excited to hear Harm's story and more from Blue as well. But I can kind of contextualize it like this. I think that when you look at early crypto art, in particular, people who are coming from the art world and looking at crypto as both a medium and a subject, you see a few different perspectives um, uh, that they were taking on it, right? There were a group of artists who were really interested in art that expressed something about cryptography and about the way that the cryptography that powers the blockchain says something about how we can share and protect information. And then there were some artists like me who were interested in using this as a medium to think about how we might potentially in the future financialize artworks. That is, how we trade them as commodities and assets. I'd actually just previously done a work that was about questioning whether the art as a sort of elite, whether an art status as an elite commodity affects its ability to actually communicate sincerely and in good faith. And so I'm thinking about all of this, and I'm finding, precedents in the art world. And again, I won't go super in depth in it, but I found there was a French artist named Yves Klein who in 1960 was very interested in not just creating immaterial artworks, that is, artworks with no physical aspect, but was also interested in what it means to sell artworks like that and how you would do it. And he had a pretty detailed system for how you would transact invisible artworks, which sounds a little bit absurd, but I assure you, if you ever want to spend a day getting into it, it's a really interesting process. And what I did was I essentially translated those rules into Solidity while putting at the center of the project sort of my own interpretation of an immaterial artwork. And simply in translating those rules, which had been written about 60 years previously, into Solidity, what came out, and I should say somewhat by accident, was something that passes the test of being a non-fungible token. And so that happened in 2017, and I was very thoughtful about it. I presented that project at an art gallery here in Toronto called Interaccess, and I had a 90-minute lecture on how I felt like crypto technology and crypto values related to conceptual art. And then, I had a story that might sound a lot like Blue's story with the skulls, where it was a project that sort of sat there unminted for a very long time, followed by a huge boost in interest, which was, I will also say Leonidas played a pretty large role in as well. So the story sounds very similar, and that's kind of the compressed version of it.
Wow, I mean that's super interesting because I think like that's the thing, right? I keep telling that there are 2 points here that kind of from both of your stories. That first thing is basically just going ahead and trying things out and experimenting, even if it's something that is not popular and others are not doing it yet, because you end up with surprising results and you come up with new things that didn't exist before. So it's very kind of, inspiring and encouraging for people to go out there and try new things instead of just copying what has been done before. And the second thing is basically that very many artists at the moment feel super discouraged when the art doesn't sell out right away, right? And they have to wait a little bit, or kind of that they get a bit of challenges and issues. It kind of really plays some kind of role on about their self-confidence, about their mindset, etc. But here we have examples of things that have been around for quite a bit, and it doesn't really matter that, it doesn't mean that it doesn't work out, right? I think people just have to be a bit patient. So, and to refer to that, why I'm saying it is because I read that all-time average price of your project, which is a series of 75 NFTs, right? Am I correct?
Mine, there actually were 101 maximum. It's just that I think only 75 have been wrapped, so only 75 appear on OpenSea.
Oh, okay, got it. So it says all-time average price is around 108 ETH. Is that correct as well?
I don't know the exact statistics, but that sounds like it would be about right. Yeah.
Around that. Okay, cool. So it's interesting. I mean, why do you think that is? Because like the interesting thing for me, like the curious part of it is that usually we see like very high prices in the market, either for very, very popular PFP projects, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe I'm just have no idea what I'm talking about, or some of the very high-end generative art projects like the collections from art blogs, so autoglyphs and stuff like that. So here we have like something completely unique and very different, and maybe even I don't know, did you have a challenge explaining it? Maybe it's even hard to sort of market, quote unquote.
Yeah. Why are artworks worth what they are worth? It's a great question. It's a question that much smarter people than me have attempted to answer and probably not succeeded.
Right? It's kind of like pure artwork, very, very sort of similar to the traditional art markets, and it's kind of and you're talking to NFT crowd there. So did you feel there was any kind of mismatch, or just I don't know, like how was the experience in that side?
Well, I've been very encouraged to the extent that there hasn't been a mismatch. Of course, it seems like I'm very interested in a lot of things, that the typical maybe PFP project or even NFT project, doesn't really jump into. I try to sort of use art as a way to ask questions or point to things, sort of, in much the same way that Harm does, and that does, require maybe a different perspective or different amount of a different perspective, say, to appreciate. And I'm sure that a lot of critics of the NFT space would say, well, that attention span simply isn't here. That intellectual curiosity certainly isn't here. That's a criticism that is leveled against the NFT space quite often, which is that people are only here looking for easy to digest JPEGs that they can flip for a profit. But the nice thing is, whenever you have an edition of only 101, it really just requires a small community to feel really passionately about it. I'm really fortunate that I found that community here in the space. I always say that my project, it's a niche project. It's not for everybody, but I still, 4 years later, I stand by the ideas. I have a lot of conviction in them, and I try to sort of carry myself as such. And I think that resonates with people, and it helps other people to find conviction in the work. And so there was a lot of excitement and enthusiasm for the project, which I'm extremely grateful for.
Yeah, I totally get that. And I think it's very, I mean, you said something very, which represents the truth. It's actually not about the quantity of people around, inside the community that matters. It's the quality of the relationship. It's like how big fans they are of what you're doing. So in your case, like, it's definitely makes sense to have less people, but like the right people actually.
Yeah, it's like I laughed a little bit when Blue was saying, "Oh, and the CryptoSkulls people only had it was nothing. It only had a couple of hundred people in it, or 1,000 people in it, or whatever." Like my Discord really only has like not that many people in it. It's a small community, and my thing with the market is like I don't really pump my project. I really try not to hype it. I'm really there for people who want to ask questions about it and want to engage. I try to engage with people as best I can, but ultimately hyping it up and pumping it up is not going to create a long-term value, neither like a financial value nor like a community value. And so I'm grateful for the prices being what the prices are. The community is still small, and I'm quite happy with it.
No, yeah, I can see that. I mean, that the small local communities do have like lots of advantages as well, right? It's cozier. You can like dedicate enough attention to every single one of them, and there is a bigger chance for creating deeper relationships with your community. When it gets over a certain number, it just becomes challenging. It's almost impossible to create that one-on-one in deep relationships. So yeah, I totally get that. Okay, let's hear Harmouch. Thanks for patiently waiting. Let's see what you've got to say. I think like I have few interesting things to ask you about your story, but probably I'll just leave you start and then I'll follow up with the questions.
Sorry, what exactly should I elaborate on?
Just to talk about your project, maybe present it and talk about the origin story, what you guys do, and we can roll from there.
Right. Yeah, because I'm also, for example, when I look at the profile pictures of the people who are in this chat, I see quite some skulls and I see some punk-looking animals and elephants and cats and dogs, and that is all very like friendly and sweet. But I personally don't relate to those kind of things at all. I'm really much more of like an art world snob, where
okay.
Yeah, so for me, and then to see like cartoon pixel images of skulls, and then on a platform talking about using NFTs as collateral for liquidity is something so far removed from my personal aesthetic obsession and commitment to finding new images and to reflect on the world in kind of new, interesting ways, that I really don't know how to respond. It's the sense of community that people are often discussing in crypto. Is often community means people who own a token in a contract, and my community coming from the art world is like other people who make art and people who like my art, some collectors, some people who might also own my NFTs, and the dynamics of crypto community and speculation is something, yeah, I haven't fully wrapped my head around that, even though I, of course, am very excited and profit of that. But yeah, it is something somehow also very remote for me, something that I don't really know how to say about it.
Yeah. I mean, I get what you're saying, and I do understand that because on a personal level, I'm involved with many NFT artists and creators, and they too sort of for them as well, many of the PFP projects are not very understandable, right? They kind of compare it with fine art, with a different sort of NFT types that have a completely different purpose, and it's very hard to compare, because to me personally, I think those two things are very different, and they tailor to different audiences. And although they kind of use the same technology, but in terms of its purpose and why they have been created, they are very different. So I totally get that, the PFP part may not resonate with you, and it's fine, because we are a very diverse community, and there are many different ways to get involved in the NFT space, and to look into it from whichever angle or whichever part of the story resonates with you most. So that's exactly why I want to get your side of the story. So maybe we can talk about what you're doing and cover that side of the NFT space.
Yeah, like I said, I've been an artist and a digital artist for a while, and crypto allowed me to define artificial scarcity and take care of editioning of artworks or the distribution of them. And that has just been very instrumental, and I have always tried to use those to connect the institutionalized art world to, let's say, a digital art world. Where in the past, the digital art world was very much focused or centered around, let's say, new media institutions, new media art festivals, and I wanted to be an artist and be active in the greater art world, and it seemed that crypto could be a bridge between those two worlds, and those were also the communities that I tried to connect somehow. And I had not anticipated that within that crypto world that such communities would grow, entirely new communities with entirely new people who did not come from the art world at all. No, sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't, and whole new ecosystems evolved, and that has hugely fascinated me. But sometimes I also feel that it would be good to maintain or establish this link to the institutional art world and learn from art history and connect to the discourses that are being held there.
Yeah, no, I get that. And yeah, as you said, those are very different communities with maybe even different motivations in some cases. So when I was looking at the left gallery, I was reading a few things about the space, and it felt like apart from the fact that you minted your first NFT in 2015, it was on a Bitcoin blockchain, right? Am I correct?
Yes, that is correct. Working with a startup called Ascribe. They don't exist anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I feel they don't exist anymore because they were too early, right? Like, was that the reason? Because like in 2015, probably the demand wasn't so much, and like, what actually happened? Did they just stop the service? Did he get disconnected? Oh yeah, hang on. Sorry, guys.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, now
I'm sorry.
Did you hear the
yes,
question?
I heard the question.
Did you hear my question?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Ascribe, they were really early, like you said, and they really they understood the potential. The blockchain that they were using, the Bitcoin blockchain, was not really ready for the kind of bandwidth they required to make it a financial success. And also, I think at that time the business model that Web3 companies have, where it is like an ICO or some kind of DAO structure, or those ideas didn't really exist that much. So it was run in an old school, more like VC backed construction, and it leads to fascinating situation that some of the tokens that we sold that obviously they're still on the Bitcoin blockchain, but we don't have access to them anymore, or not easily. And it's many, like most of them have never been burned, so they're just sitting there in eternity.
Oh my God. Yeah, I totally get that feeling because I lost access to a wallet where I have 4 crypto kitties, so I can actually see them from far away and just do nothing about it.
But you can at least
So
see them. I cannot see the assets I have that were once minted on the Scribe platform, because the interface is not there anymore. So
yeah. What? Oh, actually, it's an interesting point. Like, what happens if any of the platforms that are around at the moment disappear?
I think it's not that dramatic, because, as Blue said, if they adhere to a certain standard, they are interoperable, so they can be viewed on other platforms or indexed on other marketplaces. What Ascribe did was their invention, which they developed in house according to their own genius ideas, but there was not like a consensus among multiple parties, as far as I know, to figure out like how are we going to store this information on a blockchain. They were just very early.
Yeah, it seems so. So being very early is sometimes is not the best way to go in terms of timings. Okay, guys, how are you with time? Would you be able, like, should I open the space for people to come up and maybe ask questions? Would you be up for that?
Sure.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, cool. So from the audience, guys, if you would like to come up and ask any questions to any of the guests, please send a request and I'll put you up.
I see Leonidas down there. I'm not sure if he wants to give his perspective about historical NFTs or the story of CryptoSkulls or any of these other projects we've talked about. I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Since he's been featured as the hero for many projects in here in the stories. So I'll just let me send an invite. If he can speak, that would be awesome.
So I'm just tuning into the tail end of this, actually. So I don't want to like touch on anything that was like really covered, but I've enjoyed like the last 5 minutes, and like these are 3 of my favorite people up here. So I'll let other people ask questions. But yeah, it's super awesome that this happened, guys.
Can you actually talk? Can you actually, Leonidas? Just I'm gonna put you on the spot for a second. I know you have a panel like in the next. Is that in
10 minutes? I got 10 minutes.
Okay. I assumed it was during this, so that's why I just didn't say anything. But anyway, a lot of chats. But can you just talk a little bit more about the digital zone rediscovery? Because I know Mitchell alluded to that, and I'm actually very unaware of that story.
It's super interesting. So like Mitchell released these digital zones back in August of 2017, and they didn't even sell out, right? They were only 0.1 ETH each. There's 101 of them total, and they're released on this bonding curve. And basically, I mean, Mitchell will testify, like a couple people were interested. Some of his friends bought, but like honestly, like the term NFT hadn't been coined. Like most people just didn't understand and didn't see the value in like art on a blockchain. So it was only more recently, around I believe January, where I believe it was this CryptoPunk named Dave, who kind of came across them. He found them maybe like a month or so before I did. I think people had kind of been snooping around. Maybe one of Mitchell's friends, and Mitchell, correct me if I'm wrong, had maybe like kind of just mentioned it to somebody. And now that NFTs are a thing, everyone's like kind of excited and like connecting the dots that like, wow, this is very old, and it's a really interesting piece of art. It's not just the JPEG. So I personally found it after the Mooncat rescue. in March. And for anybody who doesn't know, that was basically this kind of moment where the like kind of modern NFT archaeology movement was born, because there was a project from 2017 called Mooncats that was found. And in the course of about 12 hours, the project went from like $0 to $100 million. And everyone was just like, oh my goodness, like old NFTs are a thing. Like there is like it's valuable to be an early relic or an early NFT. And it basically just I was one of these people, but many people went off looking for other NFTs. I hopped off that Clubhouse room and hopped on my laptop and looked for a few hours, and buried on like the seventh page of a Google search that was filtered for the year 2017. I came across Digital Zones and then ended up like kind of fumbling my way around and like finding a couple of things that were out there about it, and eventually got in touch with Mitchell. And then he ended up doing the other, I believe it was 7 series that were released, and that happened over about a 3 or 4 month period, where he would call the function that would release the digital zones in a set of 10, and then the final call happened in August of last year, and then now they're all out there. There were 101. One of them has been burned to date, so there's 100 now, and that's like the really like short version of it, because like Mitchell can testify, there's a lot of little details in there that I skipped, but that's kind of the rise of like digital zones, and it's just an incredible project. I'm sure Mitchell's talked about it earlier in this space, but it's one of my favorite projects, if not my favorite. It's like, honestly, just, I don't know, Mitchell, I have so much respect for you. I'm excited to talk to you more on Monday on that NFT Now show. And yeah, Mitchell, dude, you're the best, dude. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Actually, and thanks so much for coming up and telling the story. I always appreciate it when other people tell the story, so that I don't have to, so I don't have to talk about myself so much. But yeah, no, Leonidas really was key to helping people discover the project. I said earlier, I'm not the biggest kind of pumper or hype man of my own project, and I've been extremely fortunate that some people have found the work and been passionate about it, and kind of helped make people aware of it. Because really, all that I do is I try to put out material so that people can learn about it, and I can share these ideas that are very important to me. But I don't really then do a great job of putting that information right under people's noses. But yeah, Leonidas was one of the first people to find it, and it was, I'll be honest with you, it was like, it wasn't like, it's not that people were snooping around and found it. I was like begging people to look for it, because I felt like I felt like I had something to say. It was so funny. And so I would go and you mentioned that CryptoPunk Dave who bought into the first series. It was like, I met him on Discord, and I told him, I said, I have this project I did that's an NFT, is 2017. He's like, show me, like, this can't be true. And I try to tell people, I remember, this is a funny story that I haven't told people. I was, Art Chick was posting all this stuff at the time, but how she was really into like 2020 super rare NFTs. Like, that was like her big market that she was trying to target. So I tried to send her a DM. I said, look, I know you're interested in this. I know that like nobody cares. There's no market for this, but I made this, this thing in 2017. You might be interested. And she said I was a scammer, and she blocked me. Which is fine, by the way. It's like, it's totally.
That's really ironic, given how things have played out.
Such a funny point, Mitchell. I like, because I've obviously like DM'd a ton of people as well, just like literally trying to like just keep like basically just like get a set of eyes on this, and like, because I think it's like the coolest thing ever. Like, the blue paper is amazing. I'm just like, can we hear what like other people have to say? Like, nobody's talking about this. Everyone's focused on like I don't know, Beeple, and like there was some crazy celebrity stuff going on at the time, and like CryptoPunks were starting to pop off. But to this day, I would say every like 2 to 3 days, I'll get a message from somebody for the first time, and the first message in the like inbox is me messaging them back in May, like, hey, I found this amazing project you need to check out, and they like totally blew it off.
Yeah, and I mean, I've told you. I mean, we've had many private discussions, where I've just told you how appreciative I've been on that, and I really do mean it, because you are a very powerful ambassador to projects.
I
So
mean,
And you were a long time before the skulls. People think that this started with the skulls. It did not start with the skulls.
So everyone needs to pay attention to their DMs and check things out just in case. Just saying. Okay. I'll just give the floor to Waldy. I guess he came up to ask a question. Yeah, you were the first one. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for passing it over to me. I just wanted to briefly touch, Harm, you had spoken earlier, kind of from like a career artist perspective, which is always really interesting to hear people who grew up and are like lifetime creatives having to mesh and coexist in this crazed, whitelist, mint hype world, which I feel like you had mentioned very well spoken is kind of at odds with the ethos of like paint what you love, whereas a lot of the collection hype and pump that we see is at odds with that like native artist mindset, I feel. So it's always interesting for me to hear, and I was very interested to hear you speak and your perspective on that. As far as IKB, so I'm a little bit naive on this specific one. Are digital zones and IKB synonymous? Are those the same thing?
Yeah. It's synonymous.
Okay. So it's and I looked at it for a little while. It's really, really low supply. It's like a French guarantee note. I was looking at one of them. Like, can you explain like how you came up with this design, or like why is the floor 89 ETH? Like to any random collector just passing by and not knowing, like you could easily surmise or come to the conclusion that this is some kind of like, I don't know, like a pyramid scheme between like a handful of collectors. I mean, like I'm just taking the absolute most adverse opposition opinion and pitching it to you that way. So I'll give it back to you.
Sure. Yeah. Sure. No, I'll accept that. That's fair. And so what is it? Why does it look the way that it does? Well, then you'll be shocked to hear that it used to look like even less. And part of the idea behind it, right, was that, before I created the wrapper for the project, because of course, while like the original smart contract that that released these tokens is verifiably non-fungible, and looks a lot like an ERC 721. Of course, it predates the ERC 721 standard, and so the function names don't line up like that, right? So I created a wrapper for it, and prior to that, the point of the token was for it to point to something that is definitely off-chain. And what it points to, and of course, anybody's welcome to take an uncharitable view that this sounds very scammy, but it points to a sort of promise of an immaterial sensibility, and those are the words of the French artist Yves Klein, that exists off the blockchain, probably outside of this, sort of physical plane of existence. And so there was an idea, that was put forth by Klein, and that, I think was advanced by a lot of conceptualists later in the 1960s, that, an artwork, really was an idea. That was sort of a conceptualist point of view. And I think Klein's point of view was a little bit more spiritual, a little bit less cerebral, was that an artwork was really, you can think of it like an antenna that is finely tuned to the sort of history, the sensibility, the aura, whatever terminology you want to use, that an artist kind of puts into the world. And he had the idea that was his true artwork. And he had also recognized that art was a marketplace as well, and that these things would need to be sold to be validated, and that the market was in some ways a very rough instrument for measuring people's connection and relationship to an artwork. So he came up with these systems to sell them, and ultimately realized that the only way he could sell this was to just create a receipt for it, and people could transact and buy and resell the receipt. And so this idea had a lot of resonance for me when I was thinking about what art on the blockchain would be, because of course, I didn't think, I can't put an artwork on a blockchain. I can't send a marble sculpture to the blockchain. I can't stuff an oil on canvas into the blockchain. All I can do is create a token that points to something else. Now, of course, there are, artists who have expanded on this, like Harm, who have actually, put artwork on the blockchain. But, in general, that's not how I think most artworks are going to be. And so, why is the project, worth anything or interesting? Because in finding this as the analog, the metaphor for what an NFT is, it is sort of like the NFT that is about what all NFTs at their essence are, which is pointing you to an image that is not the receipt, or is pointing you to an artwork that is not the receipt, is pointing you to a promise, or as we hear a lot, a sense of community. The sense of community that you feel whenever you get a crypto skull or an ape or a punk or whatever is for whatever your on-chain maxi principles may be. It will certainly never exist on the blockchain, any sort of like meaningful enumeration of that. And so that's what it is. When I made the wrapper, I made a receipt that was inspired by this is almost identical to what Yves Klein's original receipts looked like. And that's what it is. It is a pure NFT. And the wrapped version is a receipt for a receipt. And there are, and it's worth what it's worth, because I guess there are like 101 people who think that's a cool idea.
Very cool. Thanks for taking the time to describe that in detail, especially the way that I pitched it to you. But I was trying to give it to you in a way, and that someone who is not savvy about this project might look at it. It's very imposing to look at such a low supply project with such a high floor price and just be completely dumbfounded by what is happening behind the scenes. So thanks for that.
No, I appreciate the question, and I also appreciate the way you phrase it, because people should. One of the things that I really believe in is that art shouldn't be. Art doesn't need to be so daunting and exclusive, and that also means you don't have to dumb your ideas down at all as an artist. You can still make smart, intelligent artwork that has a lot of depth to it. You just have to be very accepting when people come and have questions, and it's often usually very useful to phrase those questions in a slightly, you didn't phrase it adversarially. You just said, you took the sort of perspective of kind of like Eli 5 perspective, and I think that's very cool, and I really appreciate how much of that happens in this space. And if people hadn't taken the time to ask questions like that, then this project would be it would be still completely anonymous.
Cool. Hey everyone, I got a drop. Ani, thank you so much for having me. Look forward to collaborating with you in the future. Love NFTfi and what you guys are doing. Mitchell, Harm, guys, it's been super fun. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming over. Thanks for your time, and we'll be in touch for sure.
Cheers.
Bye. Okay, I guess we have 10 more minutes. Yeah, so if anyone would like to come and ask any more questions, please feel free. If no, we'll just be wrapping it up. Any final comments? Anything you would like to add, Harm or Mitchell?
I think I'm okay. I enjoy this conversation. It's also getting later. It's 10 o'clock in Berlin.
Yeah, it's 9 in here as well. Okay, so I guess just to remind you, for everyone in the audience, with NFTfi, you can use your NFTs that you own to access the liquidity that you need. NFTfi.com is our website. If you need to learn more about us or have any questions, feel free to join our Discord. The link is in our bio. The team is there to talk to you directly, so feel free to come and check us out. Other than that, I guess we had a quite productive conversation. We'll have more of this in the future. So if you follow us on Twitter, you will see when those are happening. We don't usually do them at the same time because we're kind of, scheduling it according to our guests' availability. But thank you very much, Harm and Mitchell, for coming over and for your time and for the nice conversation.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks a lot, and have a nice evening, everyone, or whatever time it is in there.
You too. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.